path within that one, and accidentally I dragged my stupid body down the rabbit hole. Except instead of ending in a dead end, this one ended in a slight hollow. I don't ever want to describe exactly what I found there. I'm sorry, but I just can't. It was a younger looking woman, naked, covered in lacerations and stab wounds in the fetal position. Her glassy, glazed eyes seemed to look straight through me. I won't go any further than that. I was too scared to scream, and I froze there while dark, burgundy stains formed on my jeans. I was sitting there, frozen, and then I heard someone else coming along the path. Have you ever been so scared that for one moment, one insane moment, you truly consider something incredibly stupid as a viable option to escape? That was one of those times. I let out a short, trembling whisper and started moving. Whoever was on the path stopped and then eagerly started moving forward again. I could hear the panting, uneven breaths of a man. A horrible marker of whoever it was getting closer and closer to me by the second. By some wondrous, beautiful miracle, he missed the path leading to the brushy hollow. I heard him moving down past the entrance, dragging something clunky and awkward behind him. I heard clinking noises and the occasional effort to silence the small, sharp noises. I heard a low curse somewhere towards the end of the tunnel, and I blasted out of the undergrowth tunnel like a bullet forcing its way out of a barrel. Cracks, crashes, and obnoxious rustling was all around me as I heard the man sharply intake a breath and begin to move towards me. The deep panting was getting closer and closer to me. I thought I was going to be too slow at exiting, but somehow, I exploded out of the entrance, got onto my wobbly, half-asleep legs, and started booking it down the trail. The unknown pursuer was close behind me for a bit, but it seemed like he was too exhausted to chase me at that same speed for long. I know everyone loves to rip on the fact that people always trip in horror movies, but in all honesty, tripping is something I am amazed I didn't do. With adrenaline coursing through me at the speed of Usain Bolt, trying to keep my jello-like legs to move me away from whoever was behind me was like trying to run on water. It felt like an eternity, but I finally reached the main trail running back to the camp, and sprinted down it screaming bloody murder. Confused faces looked out from the trees, and I think someone called after me. Reaching the camp was easy, but trying to explain why I woke up half the people in the camp and bolted out of the woods at breakneck speed was harder. When I finally choked the words out to explain, I remember a profound, insidious silence throughout the group of adults waiting at the mouth of the trail. I really don't remember a whole lot from that point on. I do know that the cops were called, and my mother and aunt ran shrieking and wailing along the trail, calling for the other kids to come back to safety. When someone's yelling like that, you don't ignore it. They rounded everyone up in 30 seconds flat and barreled back into the camp. The police found a man out in the woods, creeping along the trail, clutching a knife. A black garbage bag with a plethora of sharp objects and a saw was found abandoned on the trail. Some were speckled and smeared with dried blood. I don't think there's really any getting over it. I still have nightmares sometimes, of the man chasing me, breathing heavily down the back of my neck, trying to catch me. Sometimes he succeeds. So, this is a story that happened to my mom's friend in Korea about 10 years ago. Every time I hear this story, I still get the chills. My mom's friend lived in an apartment complex in Seoul, South Korea. She was a stay-at-home mother with a young daughter, and her husband worked during the day. One day, she was coming home from running errands with her daughter and got onto the elevator in her building. When she got on, she noticed that there was a man wearing a cap and a yellow raincoat, and he kept his head low so that she couldn't really see his face. She immediately felt really uneasy, and she made her daughter stand to her side, furthest away from the man. What made her feel even more uncomfortable was that when she pressed the button for her floor, there was no other lit number. And on top of that, she noticed that he was carrying something wrapped inside newspaper close to his side. Things started to click in my mom's friend's head and she started to panic and decided to take out her cell phone and pretend like she was calling home to her husband, who was obviously really not at home and at work. She started saying things like, "Oh, I'm on the elevator and about to get off. Can you get the door for me?" And making it seem like her husband was waiting for her at home. When the elevator did reach her floor, I think she lived on the 12th floor or something, she quickly got off, grabbed her daughter, and started to walk as fast as she could to her apartment. She noticed that the man also got off on her floor and was slowly following her down the hallway. When my mom's friend got to her door, she started to bang on it and was shouting things like, "Hey, I'm home, please open the door," and kind of pretended like her husband was coming to answer the door. Upon seeing this, the man in the yellow raincoat started to walk away back towards the elevator. When he seemed to be far away enough, my mom's friend quickly picked up her daughter and slid open her door's passcode thing. This is usually how people get into their homes in Korea. And she started to frantically put in her key code. But the problem was that the buttons would make noise, so the man knew that no one was going to answer the door for her. And he turned around and started to run back towards her. My mom's friend, at this point, was practically screaming, and when she finally got her door to open, the first thing she did was throw her daughter in through the door. When she got in herself, she saw that the man was pretty much inches from the door, but she managed to shut it and lock it before he could wedge his hand or a weapon into the door. Afterwards, looking through the door's peephole, she saw that the man was walking away back towards the elevator. Several months later, my mom's friend was watching the news and there was a coverage on the capture of a serial killer named Yoo Young Chol, who used to kill a lot of prostitutes.
I'm not posting this for attention or pity. I'm sharing this experience to warn others, and if given the chance, to save someone else's life. I have never told anyone this story before. I guess you could say it's one of my deepest, darkest secrets. That ugly skeleton in my closet. This story takes place around 9 years ago, when I was 6 years old. My parents divorced when I was very young, and of course separated. I live with my mother and visit my father on vacations, especially summer vacation. Some background about where my father lives. Please bear with me. He's a few states away from me. I don't feel entirely comfortable stating what town or state, or the state I reside in. Sorry. The town was very, very small. Literally, the population is about 728 people. Most of the residents were over the age of 70. So pretty harmless, right? Well, that's what I thought. My father's neighbors 2 houses down was a married couple that came over from the UK. They were in their late 40s, early 50s. For the life of me, I cannot remember the wife's name. But I do remember that she was a lady who loved to gossip and talk smack about others. Her husband, on the other hand, was named Richard. But for the sake of this story, I'll be referring to him as Dick, because of how much of an asshole he was. Dick had issues, which wouldn't be revealed until much later. He was a sick and deranged man, but at the time we didn't know that. No one did. Everyone in town kind of brushed the couple off. They weren't unnoticeable, but they weren't in the spotlight. They were just there. But for some reason, Dick was on my father's radar. That sounds hilarious, I apologize. My father has a killer intuition, which is almost never wrong. He told me very, very sternly to stay away from that house, and especially from Dick. This struck me as odd because my father was hardly a serious man. He's extremely happy-go-lucky, witty, always cracking jokes, and just a delight to be around. But I was only 6 years old, and very naive. Not listening to him was my first mistake. Because the town was so small, everyone knew each other. My father didn't really worry about me getting on my scooter and riding down to the church and back. The church was not far at all. It was about 5 houses down. Almost everyone in town was friends with my dad, and knew that I was his daughter. Seeing me go up and down the sidewalk to the church and back to my dad's house was not a rare sight. I essentially did it every day. And my father always told me if I ever ran into any trouble, just to holler, and he would come running. He was extremely fast and a force to be reckoned with. The only problem with writing I had was I had to pass by Dick's house going to the church and coming back. This was mistake number 2. Now please believe me when I say I don't quite remember how all this happened. I was 6, and deep down I feel I've suppressed this dreaded memory to the point I've forgotten certain details. Dick was outside of his house, sitting on his patio. Thinking back now, I believe he had been waiting for me to pass by. He somehow coaxed me into his house, I think. Like I said, I honestly don't remember. Dick had promised me that I could pet his dog, or he had cookies or something. Me being seriously naive and trusting everyone in town, I foolishly trusted him. This was mistake number 3. I should address something right here and now. That yes, I was taught all about stranger danger and everything like that. I shouldn't have gone in. I know. I regret it every day. I was also taught early on about what areas on my body no one was allowed to touch, and if someone did, I was supposed to run away immediately, and if that wasn't an option, to call for help. As soon as I entered his home, I felt an unpleasant sensation overcome me, but I stupidly shook it off. Another red flag was the fact that when his wife's eyes landed on me, she swiftly turned the other way and left the room, going upstairs. I didn't think much of it because I was still taking in the scenery of his home and noticed he had bugs in glass cases. Besides being a certified asshole, I suppose he was also a taxidermist. I had never seen anything like that before and inquired about it. And then, everything happened so fast. He pulled up a chair and sat me down on his lap. I was growing very uncomfortable and didn't know how to excuse myself without being rude. And then, his grubby hand began rubbing my thigh, to the point where he lifted up my shorts and commented on the color of my underwear. Even though it's been 9 years, I still recall the pair, because I later threw them out. They were yellow with red polka dots. To this day, I still refuse to wear polka dotted underwear. I suppose the intelligent and rational side of my 6-year-old brain finally kicked in, because I sprang off him and bolted out the door. I thought for sure he would follow me, but he just stood on his patio, watching me run back to my father's house, with a sickening smile that has been burnt into my memory. When I got into my father's house, my dad had been cooking our dinner and asked if my ride to church had been good. I quickly nodded and headed to my room and locked myself in there for the rest of the night, and told my dad I wasn't feeling well, which wasn't a complete lie. I never told him, and I'm still not entirely sure why. It's just, I don't know. I guess at this point I don't want to upset him. I'm embarrassed and highly ashamed, and still clearly distraught over this. I should have told my father, because I know for a fact he would have beat Dick to a bloody pulp. But wait, this sadly is not where the story ends. This horror story gets worse. While I type this, I'm starting to cry because of the obvious guilt, shame, and enormous regret. But before I get ahead of myself, let me continue. A few years later, when I was about 9 or 10, I saw a girl a bit younger than me, maybe 7 or 8, cutting across my father's field into Dick's yard. I had never seen this girl before, and I knew all the kids in town. So I stopped her and asked her where she was going and why. She said she was going to visit Dick because he was like her uncle and loved him. Just hearing his name made my blood run cold. My heart hammered in my chest, and all I could think was what happened 4 years earlier. Just hearing his god-awful name made me look over to his house, and I saw him in the window, staring at us with that same sickening smile. I turned to the little girl and tried my best to explain to her that Dick was a bad, bad man, and she should stay away from him at all costs. I desperately tried to explain that he was dangerous, but she said he couldn't be, because he was so nice to her. This little girl wouldn't have any of it, and kept insisting that she loved him and he was her uncle. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't explain the concept of being touched inappropriately to a little girl who wouldn't understand or accept it. I couldn't tell my dad because I didn't want him to know about what happened with me and Dick. Once again, I was extremely embarrassed and ashamed, and desperately tried to suppress it as much as possible, to sedate my own mind and pretend like it never happened. I told her once more very sternly that he was a bad man and she should go home and never come back, but she refused to listen. Looking back now, I should have figured out her address, grabbed her hand, and walked her home. If I had a second chance, I would have brought her to her mother and would have explained to her that Dick was a pervert. But I was still so young, naive, and in denial. I think about it almost every day and live in constant regret and guilt because I later found out the next summer that Dick had raped that little girl. The girl and her mother were new in town, and after Dick had raped her, they moved away. Dick was sent to prison. I don't know for how long or where he is, and his wife moved back to the UK. I would give anything to take it all back and change what happened. I would give any amount of money, years off my life, or just my life in general, just to go back and make things right. I royally fucked up, and it cost a little girl her innocence, because I wasn't smart enough to do something. I couldn't overcome my own personal problems, which can't even compare to hers in the slightest. I carry this burden, this guilt and shame with me every day, and the saddest part is that I can't even remember that poor girl's name. So please take the time out and educate your children, your nieces and nephews, your neighbor, the children you babysit, the children you teach, the children at the daycare you work at, the dangers of strangers. And for the love of everything, to always, always, always report anything. The 5 minutes it would take to explain these concepts could seriously change the world. And it could also save a child a lifetime of pain.
I'm 16, and I live with my mom, my dad, plus my younger brother who is 14. I greatly enjoy playing guitar and practicing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which I have done with my dad and my brother for the past year. It's currently school holidays, so I will most of the time play guitar into the late hours of the night with my headphones on. This story is based on one of those particular nights. The town we live in is peaceful and trustworthy, so we only lock the front door because, well, who would break in? There's 3 trained martial artists living here. The back door to my house is into the laundry, which is sharing a wall with my bedroom, and they are connected by a hallway. So I'll get to the story. It's about 12:15 a.m. and I'm playing guitar. My parents and brother are in bed, and I'm doing the usual, watching YouTube guitarists while playing my favorite riffs. This one in particular being the Welcome to the Jungle intro by Guns N' Roses. Things are going alright, but I'm thirsty, so I go into the kitchen